Okay, we are here to talk about Severance Season 2 finale, Episode 10, titled Cold Harbor, written by Dan Erickson and directed by Ben Stiller. Mark's Audi and Innie are able to communicate via video recordings, and his Audi tries to convince the Innie to rescue Gemma after the Cold Harbor file is finished. Mark's Innie initially rejects the idea because he knows it would mean likely sacrificing himself forever. Dylan returns to the office and learns that his Audi self has mostly denied his resignation request, but learns that Audi Dylan is hoping to make himself more like the version of any Dylan that Gretchen respects. Mark does complete the Cold Harbor file with Helly there next to him. Helly convinces him he should look for Gemma and help her escape. Milchick arrives, rewards Mark for his work with a marching band performance, but Helly distracts Milchick, locks him in the bathroom so Mark can escape. On the testing floor, Gemma enters the Cold Harbor room and is asked to begin disassembling a baby crib. James Egan, Dr. Maurer observe this practice, which elicits no emotion from her. Mr. Drummond tries to sacrifice one of Lauren's goats to help shepherd the spirit of Gemma over to Kier, but Mark shows up. He and Lauren force him onto the testing floor where Mark accidentally kills Mr. Drummond. Mark does eventually find Gemma and convinces her to come back to the severed floor where he helps her escape out of the exit. However, instead of going with her, he remains behind and runs off back into the severed floor with Helly just as Milchick breaks free from the bathroom where he is imprisoned. Okay, so
Yeah.
we know we have a season 3 coming.
Yep.
According to Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller, this Gemma escapes, but Mark and Gemma go separate ways was always the plan for the end of this season. They've come out and said this in the past, 12 hours or so. Um, this is maybe not the ending I was expecting, but then I don't really know what I was expecting out of this finale. We got a lot of questions and a lot of interesting things that happened here. I would say that the sort of primary response I've seen from this is very emotionally well done, but leaves a lot of threads dangling. So I don't know which one of those threads we want to try to pull on first.
Yeah. Where to start? I mean, I guess one option would be to just work through the episode. We kind of
Yeah.
don't usually do that. An interesting place to start might be in terms of the reactions,
Mm,
because we were talking about this after we watched the episode and our own feelings about it, as it were, which I'm sure we'll get
yeah.
into a bit here. But I recall saying, like, I'm really curious to see how the world reacts. Some people are going to be angry. I haven't seen that much anger. Have you?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people saying this was really, really good, and I haven't seen that much anger, at least so far. I'm sure there's some
Yeah.
out there.
I frankly, yes, I think you and I spoke maybe on Tuesday after having watched it. And I expected there to be some frustration, some anger. There every once in a while I'll click on, some comments of a post and, some trolls are talking about it's the worst finale they've ever seen and stuff like that. But no real substantial, I think, anger or frustration at this. I certainly agree with people that say it is a well done, well produced, well shot episode. I certainly understand the things that it is setting up. Um, it just, man, there's just so many things out there, I think, that leaves unanswered, even though we actually did get some answers to some of the questions I think people have been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, part of me almost feels like too much answers, you know? Like I made a little quip on Blue Sky last night. I love Severance, but sometimes I wish it made less sense. You
Yeah.
know. I rewatched the episode last night. I enjoyed it more on the second viewing
Mhm.
for whatever that's worth. I think it is one of those where that's called for and potentially works. So if anyone watched it the first time and felt a little bit unsure, much like Twin Peaks: The Return Part 18, watch it again is my first advice. Um, yeah, so I okay. Do we want to start with the answers we get, or do we want to start with the questions we still have? We should probably start with the answers we get.
Let's start with the answers we get because there are many that we get in this episode, I think.
Yeah, so let's see. The goats, mildly disappointed. It at least seems like the
Yeah.
purpose of the goats is just to sacrifice goats. I don't know any way to kind of problematize that. I mean, it seems like they are going to kill Gemma um, after she finishes disassembling the crib. Almost like she's a lab rat or
Yeah.
something. And I thought that might be more complicated than that, but that seems relatively straightforward. And then they're
I
going to bury her with a goat, and that's the whole point of the goats. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess part of the Kier lore or religion is that this animal shepherds the spirit of this person who has died up to Kier, I guess, to thank them for their sacrifice or their service and in the furthering the efforts of Kier. But it does seem very literal in that moment where we see Drummond and Lorne that these goats are raised for the intention of just being sacrifices. Now, why there's a whole horde of people in that room protecting them, I guess maybe there's just that much importance placed on them in this ritual. But I'm trying to think of the non-literal explanation for that, and I've not come up with many reasons.
Yeah. And I'm realizing, Ryan, we're not going to be able to go answer, question, because they're tied up with one another, right? So, okay.
Exactly.
I chose to start with the goats. Everyone's always wanted to know about the goats, so let's talk through the goats. Um, yeah, I mean, they have a whole department, mammalians nurturable. Lorne asks Drummond how many times,
How
you
many
know,
more do we have to give? Yeah.
and one of the big things I found myself thinking about is what has Lumen been doing for years? And also, what is, if Mark S is refining Gemma and all 25 of those files were refined by Mark S, what's Helly been doing? What was Irving doing?
Right.
What's Dylan been doing?
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, it feels like in a weird way, season two started making the story seem way smaller, as though it's all about Gemma and it's all about Cold Harbor, while at the same time, all sorts of stuff around the edges, as it were, still implies that no, there has to be more going on, and to have been more going on for years. Maybe Cold Harbor with Gemma is the culmination. But I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if I even want to think that everything relates to that. That seems a little bit too, I don't know, tidy when there's
Yeah, and
messiness
that
around
that
the
was the
edges.
one file and the one person and the one case they were interested in completing. I I do wonder, yeah, are the things that Dylan and Helly and Irv and other people down there, I mean, optics and design. I mean, other people down there, are the things that they're doing even important in the grand scheme of things? It's like that's one of the biggest questions I have coming out of this season is what are they doing and why do they matter?
Like, yeah, it is somehow this whole thing window dressing around Mark's work. Like, it doesn't quite make sense because in season one we saw Helly um refining and completing a file, and the numbers are scary. So it seems like she's doing something,
Yeah.
right? That's a big question that I have. On the other hand, there's the painting.
Hmm.
I don't know how closely you looked at this painting. I tried to look at it pretty closely. We get some shots of particular
Mm.
parts of the painting as well, so it's relatively clear just from watching the episode, even if you did not pause it, take a screenshot, zoom in, and pan around like I did. Um, but it seems to include pretty much every character in the show.
Yep.
I didn't see Ragabi. I was looking for Ragabi. I didn't see Ragabi because that would be really fascinating, but I don't think she's
Right.
there. But Rickon is.
Riggin is.
Rickon's in the damn painting.
Rainier is. I didn't see Devon. Devon's
She's
not in
there.
there.
She's right next to Rickon.
Is she really? Okay, I must have missed
Uh-huh.
Devon
It's
thinking.
like on the left-hand side are all these people in Mark's personal life, and on the
Okay.
right-hand side are all these people from Lumen. And then in the background is the tallest waterfall on the planet.
Yeah.
And on the top, and on the top of that are some kind of shadowy figures who I think
Yes.
are either Egan's or the shadows of our main characters, or both, or I'm not entirely sure who's up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That part was not clear who they were. So I do wonder if do each of these have some sort of substantial goal or project that they are working towards that Lumen and or the Egan's have outlined? Marx is the first one to come close to being completed, and Helly and Irv and Dylan are just getting started on their journeys, but Dylan and Irv seem to be quite formidable refiners, and so yeah, they've just been refining for refining's sake, and they've just been as just sort of pawns in this game to sort of surround Mark and make him feel like he's in this work environment so that he'll get things done. Yeah, it doesn't seem like they've made it clear what the rest of the people have a purpose there to do.
Or yeah, unless maybe, I mean, maybe they've been trying to do the same thing and there actually are other subjects on the testing floor, and Mark is
Yeah,
the only one who's been able to get this far because of his personal connection with Gemma, or something like that might be the story.
yeah, yeah,
But I don't know. It's just what it's kind of weird that that question remains as open as it does, where it becomes clear what Mark is doing, but yeah, why is everyone else there? And then they kind of double down on that because now we've got a marching band. Um, but let's hold off on that for just a moment. Let's
yeah, yeah.
kind of try to
Okay.
close out what we've been talking about, because a couple of things that stuck out to me I want to tie in here. When they're in the birthing cabin at the beginning, Cobell says, "Well, once you complete Harbor, they're going to kill Gemma, right?"
Hmm.
But there is this comment that Heliar makes in the office to Mark, at like we've gotten bits of their conversation. He's been telling her about all of this. She
Hmm.
says, "What happens when they extract the chip?"
Yeah,
So this makes me think it's not simply a matter of destroying the test subject, as a scientist might say, but that they're going to take the chip out of Gemma's head. And now I'm feeling an implication that you can't do that without killing a person.
yeah,
What do you
because
think about that? Do you read it that way?
yeah, I mean, I do read it that way because Lumen at least told us through conversations in season one that reintegration is not possible. And so if you're going to do something like remove or modify or extract a chip, then there's not the possibility of, well, we can just safely get rid of that thing. You are removing something that causes, I mean, according to Cobell, that causes death. So yeah, I mean, that's how I took it as well.
That's how I'm reading it. Those are two distinct things, right? Reintegration with like PD didn't involve getting rid of the chip, right?
Right, right.
Including, and what Ragabi was doing with Mark, that didn't include trying to get the chip out of his brain, you know. So I'd always kind of wondered about that. Like, what if you just removed it? Is
Yeah.
that a possibility? And it does seem like there is an indication here that, okay, well, you can, but then the person's going to die,
Right. It
right?
does make more sense than that why Ragabi was trying the let's flood the chip, that sort
Hmm.
of experiment or something that renders it inert, I guess, because if you cannot extract it without a person dying, well, that's the path you have to go down.
Yeah, and I'm feeling like that's what they're telling us. Although they didn't necessarily have to be this subtle with that information. They're pretty subtle with it, but that's what I'm reading. And so then it does make also more sense
Yeah.
that they're going to kill Gemma, and now they've got this refined chip,
Hmm.
and that's what they want to then replicate, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good question. I just wish we knew. So this season showed us apparently more refiners from different places. We've always seen other refiners that work with Mark that are doing apparently the same thing. I can find a reason why Helly is there doing fake refining. She's supposed to be the PR thing for Egan outside. I can find a reason why Irv is there because he was once perhaps a lumen something, and we've severed him and put him on this floor and just given him tasks so he doesn't so he doesn't expose something. We can get to him later. Dylan, I have no idea why, what he's doing and why he is there, what his relevance is, but it just doesn't seem like we have been exposed to what any of the other people there could be doing. So to your point, made it much smaller, made it this one Gemma story.
Yeah. I have to imagine that it's something like what I said. And I don't know if we're going to get more information. I kind of hope that we do. In the meantime, I'm going to stick with in my imagination. These other refiners have been working on other test
Hmm.
subjects and
Yeah.
have it's just that Mark ended up being way more successful than anyone has ever been,
Yeah.
perhaps because Gemma is his wife.
Yeah, because they had such a strong relationship, and he talks about the thousands upon thousands of days of love and passion and disagreements and all the stuff that he's had with him. So that connection made his file refining much faster.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit while we're here about what the goal seems to be with Cold Harbor. As you mentioned in your summary, uh, this version of Gemma seems very emotionless.
Hmm.
And I take it that's the point. I don't know if I quite feel like the scene we get works as well as it should symbolically, but I get the idea of it with the crib.
Yeah.
Because recall in episode 7, we saw Mark bought the crib and, they were planning to have a kid and they couldn't have a kid. And
Yeah.
Lumen knows all that because, of course, Lumen ran the fertility clinic and so on and so forth, and also was spying on them in their house.
Hmm.
I think that's pretty clear in one way or another. Um, but thinking about that as a goal, I don't know what to make of it exactly. Previously, I had been thinking, okay, well, maybe the idea is as a consumer product, right? You can have an any version of you take that plane flight. You can have
Yeah.
any version of you go to the dentist, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about what the purpose of an any version of you that is utterly impassive, as it were, might be?
Yeah. I don't want, I don't think I can necessarily dismiss the idea that this is for sort of a greater public use or public consumption or consumer product because it looks like what they were doing to Gemma was having her experience however many, 24, 25 different scenarios, and each one of them was a situation where, in normal circumstances, she would have remembered from her past. It would have been something that's a part of her history, but she'd not recall it. The barrier was holding in each one of them. The baby one, perhaps the most emotional, the most visceral, was the last to be accomplished. So why not sell some sort of severance product to the public that'll say, okay, this can cover any multitude of things that you might want to sever yourself for. This is not just the plain flight severance chip, but if I want to block myself from any of these list of things, I can now do this. And been experimenting with Gemma on how they can do that within one person in a couple dozen different ways. That's just a complete guess. I really have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it just with this one, it almost seems like the interest would be more likely to be the interest another person has
Hmm.
in making you this utterly passive,
Yeah,
pliable, sort of docile. So, I mean, look, like maybe that's to the point, right? And of
yeah,
course, Lumen's nefarious, right? We don't want to lose sight of that, but that's how she seems. So I just think it's interesting to think about um the logic of that being the goal. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Because she's emotionless and disassembling the crib, but then also she'll just go along with Mark. It's like she has no personality at all,
yeah.
basically, right?
It, it it's zero personality until she leaves that room and then
Yeah,
recognizes Mars. Yes. So the idea of you can be experiencing this thing, which normally should cause, in Gemma's case, pain, but maybe in any just reasonable person, rational person, just some kind of emotion. But you get nothing out of that. They even say that there is no emotion coming from her. I think that we've had a statement that Lumen's mission is to eliminate pain. I think that's been something that's been stated in the show before. And
yeah,
so why not market a product that is anytime that you would experience any kind of pain, you can turn on your chips where you don't have to feel it anymore. So they've now figured out a way to do that 25 different times in 25 different ways with Gemma. That could be the goal of the specific thing they're developing. But again, I think we need more to confirm that.
Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, no, I think you're on the right track. Um, let's see where to go next. Um, you mentioned we don't get any Burt, we don't get any Irving. I don't know if that's terribly surprising. Although, yes, as you put in our notes, sad. Did you want to say any more about Burt and Irving?
Yeah, just as you can imagine, Stiller and Erickson have been asked ad nauseum about is he coming back? What's happening? Is this the end? They've been very elusive answering that question and basically just said for now they felt like that was the ending that they wanted to give to Irving's story. I just can't. We talked about this last week. I can't imagine that if all things were possible, they would not bring him back to this. It just, I don't know. It felt a little bit incomplete to have the guy who said, let's burn this place to the ground, not be there when there's clearly some sort of uprising about to start here. And for him not be a part of that felt a little bit, he
Yeah,
felt that. I felt his absence.
yeah. I think he may well come back. I hope he comes back. Another thing I got wondering over the past week, um, do you do you think Lumen can track the innies through
Mm.
um their chips? Or not the innies, the people with the Severance chips. Like, do you
Yeah,
think they can track Mark's location with, like GPS?
I am I am sure we could track the chips in our dogs these days, so I am sure that Lumen could track where these people are.
Right? I started thinking about that because if that's the case, well, they can track Irving. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
that he's on a train to nowhere or whatever. Um, Also, I mean, this is stuff we almost should have talked about last week. But Milchick was asking Mark for his exact location. I did get to thinking about the possibility because
Hmm.
on a first pass, I was like, well, surely they can track them through these chips, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the world we live in. I did start thinking about the possibility, like, oh, but what if an aspect of the cassette futurism, if we embrace the term, is that in this world there is no GPS.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have any satellites. You
And
know what I
that's why
mean?
all the cars are 25 plus years old.
I mean, yeah, it's not like those cars have OnStar or whatever, right? They're old
Exactly.
cars, so there's a possibility there. If anyone's been, you know, thinking about that as I have, because again, on the first pass, I was like, well, surely they can track them through their chips, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not. We don't know exactly how things work in this world that we're in, so I don't know if we'll get any confirmation one way or another. But if they can, Irving's in trouble.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
he's coming back. Yes.
or at least it can't be the end of his story. The end of the story has to be like some moving agent finding him in Montauk or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Ms. Cobell, I guess I want to go to that. And I want to talk about the scene at the beginning in more detail as well, because I thought
Yes.
it was really interesting, really good.
Yes.
I'm still, though, not sure how I feel about Harmony Cobell. I still don't trust her. Do you trust her? Because on
I,
the face of things in this episode, it very much seems like she's on Mark and Devin's side.
yeah. Yeah. I do not. And I think that they have made it ambiguous in that way on purpose, that her intentions seem to be to help Mark save Gemma and extract her from that situation and help Mark get out of, this thing that he is in. Well, Audi Mark calls it a hell that he's been in for 2 years. But why did Cobell go to Salt's Neck and get her notes and get her files, get all of this stuff, right? What is the reason to have that? So that she can prove something, so she can go back and take over something. She went there for a reason. It wasn't just
Yeah.
to sniff some ether. There had to be some purpose in doing that. And so, yeah, I think there are some ulterior motives there, but yeah, we just got none of that, it seems like.
Well, she wanted her severance plans, right, for the chip, right? So that would imply that she has some notion in mind of doing something with that. You know, that could go in a couple of directions, as we talked about before. She gets that, then she talks to Devin.
Yeah.
I don't know. The biggest thing that's sticking in my craw, I guess, is that while it seems like she and Devin have hatched this plan with regard to Mark breaking Gemma out and they lay it
Yeah.
out to him. And then we have the scene where Outie Mark is trying to convince Indy Mark to do it, which I do want to talk about more.
Yeah.
But Cobell has to know that Mark will not be able to get into that hallway without the right kind of key card. And nothing is mentioned about how he's going to get that key card when they're talking
No,
about the plan.
no. I presume that he could have taken Drummond's, but how would Cobell have known that he was going to run into and fight and kill Drummond?
No, you know what I'm saying? It works out,
Yeah.
right? He ultimately does get in,
Yeah.
but it almost seems as though Cobell told him that his key card was going to work because he gets
Oh,
up there and
okay.
tries it with his blue key card,
Yeah.
and of course it doesn't work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, of course you need the black key card or
Yeah.
whatever. You know, like at the end of season one, they needed Grainer's key card to do what they
Mm.
did. So, you know, even Mark himself maybe should have been raising that question, but I'm more tying it in with my ongoing suspicion of Cobell because you can think about it this way. Okay, well, she knows Mark won't actually be able to get into the hallway.
Yeah. So,
So she's convincing Mark to go back into work and complete Cold Harbor. And that's
yeah.
what she wants to have happen. And then to
She's
somehow
sending him on a failed mission. Yeah.
make her move to get back in the good graces with the company. That's still what I think. I don't know. The fact that
Yeah.
they're leaving this here at the end of season two, when if you're just watching what happens and not thinking about it a lot, you might think, oh well, then they brought Harmony over to Mark and Devin's side, and it reads that way on the surface. But I don't know. I think that there's going to be
Yeah. Is there a reason? Because now we're talking about this, I'm thinking, is there a reason that Cobell is saying you need to break Gemma out after you finish the file, as opposed to go down there and here's the path to go and here's how you break her out, right? Why wait? Is so that this lends more to the theory of, yeah, she wants that file done so it can help her in her whatever her next move is, as opposed to I care
yeah,
about Mark being able to break out Gemma.
right. Why does he have to complete the file before he goes?
Yeah,
Other than, I mean, she says something like, "They won't let you leave MDR until you complete the file."
yeah,
They're still not quote letting him leave MDR afterwards, you know. Um, it works out though because Milchick shows up and leads a marching band, and I thought that was interesting. I don't know, choreography and merriment. So we have a whole other department that's just a marching band. I saw someone on social media asking if uh the Audis know how to play the instruments. I like to imagine that they don't,
yeah. I
or that
know.
they didn't before they became severed, you know, like they took this job and then learned how to play trombone. Um,
And they go to their
and
locker. They go to their lockers every day when they get to work and have to put on a band uniform. They have no idea why when they get on the elevator, what it is they're doing.
yeah, I don't know. Were you ever in band? We just been all
Yes,
over.
yes, yes. Trombone.
You play trombone?
Yes.
So did I. I
For
don't
three
know if we
years.
talked
Yes,
about
sir.
that before. Um, so yeah, we got that going for us. Um, I do imagine that with that experience of playing an instrument, that if it were the case that the innies learned how to play the instruments, that then now magically the Audis would know how to play
Would
the
know how.
instruments,
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
they're aware of it or not. I have the feeling like that is one of those things that, as Ben Stiller would say, permeates.
Permeates. Yeah. I just I, I had this thought while watching the band, and then now again while talking about the mammalians nurturable and that large group that's down there. I hate thinking about, I mean, because this was obviously a fascinating scene. There's all sorts of this stuff out there about uh, how Mr. Milchick and this band, rehearsed and did this scene. It's just, just fascinating and interesting visual, certainly. But now I'm just wondering, Dylan and Helly give them this speech. There's Lauren and her group. There are the goats. Are these groups just being introduced so that there is an army down there, so that there's just people that, no matter what Lumen throws at them, they can overcome whatever it is,
It
why
kind
else
of
do we need a marching band?
it does kind of feel like it a little bit.
Yeah.
The marching band worked for me. I enjoyed the scene. I thought it was hilarious. It is it plausible that Lumen would have a whole department on the severed floor that is a marching band just for this,
Yeah.
presumably, or
Just
Are
waiting
other
2 years for somebody to finish files. Yeah.
or other circumstances like this sufficiently, I mean, I guess, in part you can take it as a commentary on things about corporate culture in the 21st century and how you can get this kind of stuff around it that maybe doesn't make a whole lot
Yeah.
of sense, like Silicon Valley offices with ping pong cables or whatever.
Yeah.
And like maybe this is going a step further, but I
Yeah.
don't think it strains plausibility too much, oddly enough. Uh, Again, I'm more worried about that question we were talking about before. Is all of this for Mark? That feels
Yeah.
like you're building up too much around it. Like you would need all of that if it's just a matter of
Yeah.
Mark
Well,
only
if
Mark's work being important. So I still have to think
all
that's not the case somehow.
and also if it keeps the tradition going, if we get one milkshake dance scene per season, then okay, we'll figure out a way to make that happen. Because yeah, I mean he was great once again.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, even if it strains plausibility too much in your mind,
Yeah.
just enjoy Tremel Tillman with a baton leading a marching band. Just
Right.
enjoy him dancing around in MBR. And it's wonderful. Just enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that does lead, though, to, as you said, at the end, Milchick's largely sidelined after he gets locked in the bathroom, or I mean, he's just trying to get out of the bathroom.
Yeah.
That is important to Mark's succeeding in freeing
Definitely.
Gemma, that he's held up that way. Dylan pushes the vending machine in front, and then when finally Milchek manages to knock it over, he's confronted with the marching band, who they've now gotten on their side, um, which is noteworthy because I think
Yeah.
in terms of the setup for season three, the marching band is on their side, Mammalian's Nurturable's on their side. We haven't seen O and D in a while, but Felicia and Mark seem like they're pretty cool, whatever, I guess.
Yep.
Are there other departments? I think so, but I
Yep.
definitely, at risk of getting ahead of where we should be in our conversation, I definitely think it is setting up that kind of um, any rebellion or
Yeah.
occupying Lumen.
Yeah, I like your phrase there, the Occupy loop. And I think that's one of the big questions, which maybe we'll get to is, get closer to the end here of Mark and Helly are clearly running away from the idea of their non-existence, but what are they running to, right? Where are they going? What are they doing? These are the large questions we can touch on in a bit. But yes, the sense of, okay, there's now a group of people down there that all sort of have this common cause. The whole Milchik of it all, there was some times in the season it seemed like they were sort of painting him in this empathetic light where trying to really connect with him, and maybe he was shifting more towards I am not wanting to be a part of what's happening here, but I don't know. I think his authority was tested, and he doesn't appreciate when his authority is tested, and so he may just be fully back on board now, especially with he doesn't know this yet, but no more drumming around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess while we're here, we should just follow this out. We don't need to hold it off. Apologies if the structure of the podcast conversation is
Yeah.
bothering you because we're going out of order. But one of the things that struck me as you get to the end of the episode, right? As Mark grabs Helly's hand, they're running down the hallway. There's a freeze
Mm.
frame. If you think about it just for a moment, maybe everyone already had this thought in one way or another. They can't leave
No.
because as soon as they leave, they would become their outies.
Mm.
If it's outie Mark, he's going to go find Gemma. He's not coming back. If it's outie Helena, she's not going to come back either. Why would she? Mark completed Gold Harbor,
She's
right?
not going to be allowed to come back. Yeah.
Well, she wouldn't want to
No.
either, right? She didn't want to go back down there severed after the Ortbo and everything. But they made her because of the importance
Hmm.
of Cold Harbor. Well, Cold Harbor's done, right? So they are pursuing this love, as it were, but it can only exist on the severed floor,
Yeah.
right? So I think the plan has to be along the lines of occupy Lumen,
Yeah.
and even more than thinking about Occupy Wall Street. before that, when I was in New York, I was at the New School for Social Research. Then there was an instance where students occupied the old building there on
Yep.
Fifth Avenue um, in protest, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, we're not going to leave the building. So I'm thinking more along those lines. They're going to take over
Yeah.
the severed floor at least and simply refuse to leave.
Yeah.
And
This
then,
this has happened plenty in, as you well know, in higher ed over the last, 15, 16 months with some of this Israel Palestine stuff where, yeah, the to make the point, you occupy a space and refuse to leave. Now you'd
yeah,
have to have a force big enough to make them leave, but if they've got 100 people down there, and there doesn't seem to be a very big lumen security apparatus. Surprisingly, I have no idea why. What's going to make them leave this floor? I'm very curious to find that out.
right. So Drummond's dead.
Yep.
Um, I don't know how much you want to talk about the fight scene. It was pretty funny. And the moment when Mark switches from Indy Dowdy and like accidentally kills Drummond was
Yeah.
hilarious because
There's
he's in mid sentence. He's like, "Then you're going to take me to blood spurts out." No, yeah,
there's really good stuff on how they did that in the official podcast if you're curious. Some of
yeah.
the
And apparently,
choreography.
I
Yeah.
was listening to that, and Adam Scott was saying in one take there was like way too much blood,
Yeah.
and he'd like to see the film. So I don't know if we'll have that chance. But anyway, to round this out, yeah, so Drummond's dead. Grainer it died in season one. There is some weird stuff, like we saw Man in Hallway, who was the
Mhm.
same actor who played Mark Shadow, and
Yeah.
what was going on with the Watchers, and where did they go, and how do they factor in? And you still got Maurer down on the testing floor, but his first impulse is to call for Drummond, who's dead. You got Milchek, who's been sort of neutralized.
Yeah.
Is James still on the floor, or did he leave? Maybe we don't know for sure.
That's a great
Um,
question. What floor was he on when he was watching Gemma? Was he
yeah, I don't
on
know.
the seventh floor? We don't know,
Well, he was on the severed floor when he was talking to Helly and told her
right?
that he doesn't love his daughter. But he's seen Kier
You're
in
in her.
any Helly, which is
Yeah.
worth noting.
So maybe he's down there. Yeah, this could be yeah, we're gonna find Milchick and Maurer and Jamie Egan, and we're gonna take some people under our control while we're down here.
Yeah, potentially we've got Jamie Egan hostage.
Yeah.
Milchek, as you noted, his loyalties have been at least a little bit problematized over the course
Yep.
of season two. Where does he land on things? He's going to be caught in the middle again, right? Um, but also the fact that just thinking about this sort of strategically,
Mm.
one of the central innies occupying Lumen is Helena Egan,
Yeah, that's right.
right? So that cuts off the possibility of just like sending in guys with guns to kill everyone or
Yep.
something.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So it'll be interesting. I'm fairly confident that's where season three has to go, and that it will then be really kind of raising this almost political question about the rights of innies and so on. You
Yeah.
know,
I think that there was some real interesting stuff about that idea in the Mark any Audi video conversation, right? That
yeah,
even though you've been around much longer and you have a lot more experience, why do I not have the same rights as you? Why do I? Because I may be more immature, because I may not have um, as many opportunities as you have. Why do I get treated less, or why do I have to be the one to die? So yeah, I think there are some very interesting political, social, personal, I think, questions that will be raised by that. I mean, they were raised this year, but I think they're going to go probably all in next year.
yeah. Let's talk about that scene a bit more because I think it's absolutely central.
Hmm.
Particularly when I was rewatching it last night, I thought, well, this is the most important scene in the episode.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and man, kudos to Adam Scott in that conversation between two versions of Mark
Yep.
and the small differences in affect and so on, right? Like between any Mark and outie Mark. And and all of that. Really, really good acting work here. But yeah, Amy Mark has a point, right? He wants to continue to exist,
Right.
but more importantly, he's in love with Ellie.
Yes.
And Audi Mark is saying, sacrifice your existence, sacrifice your love for the sake of mine. And so I think it ultimately lands, if you think about it the right way, that Amy Mark's ultimate response to that is no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
Yeah.
sacrifice myself and my love for you, right?
Yeah.
Really playing on it being two persons. So like at the end of the episode when Gemma's yelling at the door, I mean it's gut wrenching
Yeah.
because at least for me, I don't know about you, but a large part of me was like, go through the door, Mark. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But it's important that it makes enough sense that any Mark doesn't. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It made me immediately think of Dylan and what he loses in episode 9 and how it makes him decide to not exist anymore for all intents and purposes, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
lost that I mean, he had it for what, a few days, and he's lost it and doesn't want to exist anymore. Mark says, I have an opportunity to keep that. If I can convince Helly, we can maintain that thing that we've developed over the course of these weeks. As long as I have the chance at it, I do not want to end my existence. And no way do I want to do that. And so, yeah, there's something very powerful about the idea of that connection that they have made, and that's what keeps them going. Whereas Dylan has said, well, I've lost it, so I have no desire to be here anymore.
Right, except by the end, did this work for you with Dylan? He reads the note from his Audi and ultimately then seems to come around to the idea of continuing to work at Lumen and exist as an any. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a sense of his Audi, um, and maybe even Gretchen by extension gave him some value and some worth where he never saw any in himself before beyond just being good at refining numbers. I think once he evolved from understanding that he was more than a person to refine numbers and had this connection relationship, he needed someone to tell him that, yeah, that's important. And you are this person that has this kind of value and this kind of worth. I don't know what role he would play in some sort of Occupy movement, but it seems maybe he's motivated now by um, the rights of the people down there as opposed to just he wants aggression to come back.
Yeah, I think that's how I read it.
Yeah.
We don't really get a lot with Dylan
Mm.
after he reads the note, but he does rush into MDR and push the vending machine in front of the door. So I guess in part I was thinking, his Audi calls him a badass,
Yeah.
and that this does kind of motivate any Dylan to be a badass again.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whereas all season he's been kind of caught up in how, well, I don't want to lose my privileges of visiting with Gretchen and all of that.
Yep.
You know, like that quip Helly made a couple episodes ago. He said the notes behind the poster of you actually being brave.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, he's going to be brave again. He's a badass Andy Dillon again. I think that's how I read that.
Yeah.
Um, Circling back to the Mark conversation, I did find it really significant how Audi Mark gets Helly's name wrong, and I think that was a pivotal moment.
It
You know,
was it was extremely pivotal. I think the sense of, well, if you really cared about me, you would at least take enough time and make enough investment in learning the name of the person that, I care for so deeply. If you're wanting me to do something for you because you care for someone so deeply, at least connect with me on that level. But once he messed that up, that was it. Yeah,
yeah, and it kind of echoes a little bit with Helena Egan getting Gemma's name wrong in the Chinese restaurant.
that's exactly right.
Um, so I feel like there's more to talk about here, but what have we not talked about?
I just wanted to think about the Gemma situation for a second, right? Because I
Hmm.
understand clearly wanting to get her out. I can understand Mark's decision and the Mark that he is in that moment to stay behind, but uh, Gemma is not free where she is. He didn't shove her outside into the parking lot. She is inside the Lumen building without access to the severed floor. She can't go back through that door. And so all she could do now is try to find her way out through the halls of Lumen to get outside and hope that someone that she may not know is there to rescue her. I'm just sort of curious as to how that will happen, or if they attempt to find a way, or how she got out of that situation.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they'll jump over it. But in my imagination, okay. So we saw what's outside that door back in season one at the beginning because Helly kept running out that door. She'd run out that
Yep.
door, she'd turn into Helena Egan and, run into Milchak and be like, man, try again,
Mhm.
Well, we didn't know she was Helena Egan at that point. Some people started guessing quickly, I guess, but
Yeah.
that she was an Egan or something. But anyway, we know now. I think, and maybe I have just made this up, but I think that now that Gemma is through that door to the exit stairwell, that's
Hmm.
how they refer to it,
Yep.
that she could just go down the stairs and get out of the building.
Okay.
Unless she was going to be stopped by security or something. But who would that be? Grader's
Yeah.
dead, Drummond's dead, Milchick's hostage, you know what I mean? Um, I don't think the guy who mans the desk, I mean, I don't even know if she would like go by him, whatever his name is, Judd or whatever.
Yeah.
Definitely has a name like that.
Seems like
Um,
a flaw in the system if you can just walk out a back door and leave the building if you're a severed employee. It seems like they're trying to track when they leave, when they come, when they go. Yeah, maybe there are other levers of security we don't know about, but it just seems like a
yeah,
she's in an interesting place right now, and I'm just curious to see how they explain that.
it's a question, but I mean, also we have to bear in mind the extent to which in normal times the innies are being held captive by their outies,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So if my innie walks out the door of the exit stairwell, I'm going to become my outie, and my outie's going to be like, what's going on here? And go back in, you know? Even if that means circling around, going down the elevator or whatever, or like,
yeah,
you go find Milchick or something, like, what's going on? Why did my innie leave work,
yeah, yeah,
And then they get sent to the break room or whatever, at least if it was season one, things changed a bit in season two. So there is
yeah.
that difference. So again, at least in my imagination, I'm thinking that once Gemma gives up on yelling at the door, she will be able to turn around, go down the stairs, and get out of the building.
Get out. Yeah.
And then, like, maybe Devin's waiting out there.
I would say there had to be a plan to have someone there nearby that Mark trusts to be able to take her. But yeah, maybe that would be a very interesting way to open season three is Gemma busting out of some doors and finding Devin and then, where's Mark type of situation.
That's yeah, exactly. Like in my imagination, that's how season three opens. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Gemma runs out. Devin's there. Cobell's probably with her just to make things weird. And we go from there, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
on the severed floor, it's the Occupy Lumen idea. Because what any Mark wants is not reintegration or what have you.
Hmm.
He wants to be able to continue to exist as himself, as an any.
Yeah,
So and so of course does Heliar, right?
exactly.
So I think that that's what they're kind of teeing up is kind of advocating for the rights of the innies as persons.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
And
100% the way I see it. Yeah.
that is interesting. Um, man, there's definitely more stuff we can talk about. I believe our plan is to do another podcast on Severance next week, right? So what do we want to be sure to hit on here pertaining to this episode? Um, some of these questions maybe we do want to leave to next week.
Yeah, I was thinking I've got a long
Um,
list of things that I'm curious about in terms of plot lines and where they go, how are they relevant to this season, and what could be done with them next season. So yeah, we could certainly save those for more of our sort of what's outstanding and what are the theories heading into season three.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good plan. We're already been going for pushing an hour just on Severance, I think. I think we're already at like 50 minutes just on the Severance part. So
Yeah.
um we're gonna continue talking about Severance next week, kind of do a theory roundup, um, maybe pull on some other sources, ideas in the world, you know. I guess feel free if you want to like leave comments here on the YouTube video or elsewhere about theories that you have. Maybe we'll talk about them next week. We're going to be paying attention to what people in the world are saying, and then of course we also have some of our own
Mhm.
lingering questions we haven't quite gotten to, and I definitely think there will be plenty to talk about to fill another podcast next week. Anything else pertaining to this episode in particular you want to hit on before we go, Ryan?
No, I think it was a good point that I not necessarily want to say understood it, but respected it more after watching it a second time, and sort of what they're doing and what they're setting up. I think I was looking at the mechanics of how things were working the first time, but understand where they're headed more after watching it a second time. So if you watched it once and were frustrated, confused, I do recommend the second watching.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Particularly if you, it does seem like it landed well for some people on the first viewing. Great, cool. But yeah, uh, if not, I would suggest potentially watching it again. Yeah, I think it's good advice here. All right. So thanks as always for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast. If so, please do leave us a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate it. You can check out tvobsessive.com, primarily for written work. I've been writing on Severance week to week throughout both seasons, right? So if you want to read about Severance, that's there. And we're also on any number of other shows at the moment, kind of a lot. It's starting to feel like
Yeah.
a lot. It's great. Got Yellow Jackets, White Lotus, and Last of Us is coming up, The Handmaid's Tale, new episodes of Black Mirror, and more things that I'm sure I'm not thinking of right now. So check out tvobsessive.com, and you can follow the site on social media. Search for TV Obsessive, and we'll see you next week.
All right, look forward to it. See you next time.